Hi, welcome to Funky Rainbow, this Kashmiri sort of Saturday morning, really. And is there, I can see, of course, so many friends already up there saying hello and good morning. Why Kashmir? I mean, the reasons, to curate books, could they just pop up here, there, everywhere. About two, maybe two and a half weeks ago, suddenly on the television, there was Shami Kapoor crooning to Sharmila Tagore, singing "Tareef karun kya uski jisne तुम्हें बनाया," but obviously more than तुम्हें जिन्हें कश्मीर को बनाया. And it was absolutely such a lovely song to watch just for 4 or 5 minutes. And that sort of triggered off some thoughts about Kashmir and books around Kashmir. And that's exactly how we put together themes for bazaars. Maybe there are specific days, maybe there are things that people on the team are talking about. There's some interest that absolutely is like, it's like a bee in the bonnet that gets into the head of somebody in Team Funky Rainbow. And then the only way that bee can be let out of the bonnet is by connecting children's books to that theme. And this time it just happened to be uh, Muhammad Rafi's songs. And just before I began the bazaar, Mutama reminds me that it is Rafi's death anniversary today. I can see Ramendra Kumar saying, "Hi guys, Ritvika Roy, good morning. So lovely to see you. Thank you for picking up this giant clutch of books from Funky Rainbow and posting. We just love it when people post pictures of the books that have reached them from Funky Rainbow. Just makes it so much more colorful, so much more real." I can see Jyoti Narayan saying, "Morning, waiting for the Kashmiri book tour. Yes, yes, yes. Mutama was issuing tickets just a while ago for us to get on board." The thing is, and that song, it really got me thinking. And about books that we've read on Kashmir, books that are actually, several Indian creators, writers, and illustrators putting together these lovely books for children. And, it was just at that time that it struck me that we've grown up, like, all of us at Team Funky Rainbow, belonging to a generation where there was just that image of Kashmir as paradise. I mean, holiday destinations, if you wanted to go on a holiday, the most perfect place that you could travel to was Kashmir. And in fact, one of my earliest holiday memories, and I believe I may have been 5 or maybe 6 years then, was sitting on my dad's shoulders and seeing the sun rise up, amidst, just behind those snow-clad mountains. I've never forgotten that. That's my first holiday memory that I have. And it was, of course, in Kashmir, visiting the Dal Lake and looking up at that spectacular sunrise, and those ice-capped mountains. The thing is, and so obviously that was such an abiding memory. But when we went to school, when we were in college, we did know, and we did see conflict and violence take over the valley and wreak havoc in the lives of people who live there. I mean, there was a faint understanding of it from looking at what was happening, maybe mostly in newspapers or reading about it in news magazines. Did that. And yet, the idea of Kashmir as paradise never went away. And we do know now that it still remains paradise. And yes, there are problems in paradise. And what is wonderful about the clutch of books that we have lined up for you, and as always, they are books for children of all age groups. There are happy ones, there are books that use the conflict as a backdrop to tell stories. And all these books that sort of really explain and give children of all age groups, young adults of children of all age groups, young adults and adults, a perspective on paradise. Plus, like I was talking to the guests of our show, who will join us a little later, Kashmir, was so, like I said, so dear to us growing up. But I wonder what it is for generation of today. Many of them may never have traveled there. It's been deemed a conflict zone. You're often just hearing of violence and bloodshed and terrorism in those areas. How do we make them understand, the enigma and the mystery and the story of this part of India? And that's where books always doing the job really well. And I do want to say that there are books for children in all age groups, from picture books for young readers going up to some wonderful books for young adults, many of which can be easily read by all of us adults as well. And so, of course, all these books up on our website, www.funkyrainbow.com. Click on the tab that says Kashmir. Click on the tab that says Book Bazaar, and there's season one and season two. Click on the tab that says season two, and there's the first drop down item will be Kashmir. Many books up there, only a few of which we can talk about. Our guests who will join us later in the show, and that really promises to be a riveting conversation. Everybody, all of you know of Paro Anand. She's really one of India's foremost writers for children, and I believe she carries a piece of Kashmir in her, has always been carrying a piece of Kashmir in her heart, because she has Kashmir in so many books. And Paro's books, all books of fiction. We also have an award-winning journalist who's coming out with her first book called Postbox Kashmir, Divya Arya, who is a correspondent with the BBC, and her book is going to be released on the 5th of August, just on the eve of the second anniversary, rather, the second anniversary of the removal of the special status of Kashmir using Article 370. It's a fantastic book of nonfiction meant for young adults. And I'm delighted to say that you're hearing this first. The book is not even released. It's going to be released on the 5th of August, but you're hearing about it first at Funky Rainbow, and you're going to be talking, hearing a conversation with the author of this book. Muttama is asking me which jasoos, did this jasusi for us. Well, like I said, the minute you decide on a theme, there is so much serendipity around you when you live and love books. And, no sooner were we sort of finalizing all these thoughts, in comes a mail from the wonderful editor Shayoni Basu, and this is a book that Duckbill's going to be bringing out. And this was just a mail. She had no idea that we were going to be doing a bazaar on Kashmir. I had no idea that there was a book in the pipeline on Kashmir. But in comes a mail saying that, there's this book, Postbox Kashmir, that's going to be coming out in a couple of days. And there we were. Oh my God, this just absolutely fits right into the theme of our bazaar. So you heard it first. It's up on pre-order at Funky Rainbow, and you can listen to what the author says as part of her conversation. But this much I can assure you, reading the PDF, we don't have the printed copy of the book yet, but Penguin kind enough to share a PDF so that we could get a sense of the book before we hosted its author in the bazaar. It's an absolutely riveting read, and more about it later when the author joins us on the show. So editors, obviously, Muttama, making great jasuses, right? So that's pretty much how our Kashmir, how our second guest of the day joined us. And she says, yes, we have a great spy network as well, all needed in the world of books. For my friends on Instagram, I want to say that this conversation promises to be really riveting. I'm afraid we can't live stream it on to Instagram. Please do join us on Facebook or YouTube, Funky Rainbow's Facebook page or YouTube channel, to catch that conversation, say between 12:15, 12:20, and 1 o'clock, with award-winning author Paru Anand and award-winning journalist Divya Arya. We hope that you'll be able to log in and watch it on YouTube or on Facebook. I want to say, of course, that we desperately need to take a short bazaar break. And so this is the last bazaar of season two. And this is the lovely thing about doing your own thing. We can decide when season one ends, when season two begins, when season two ends. But oh, yes, like Sham's reminding me that we even influence the season, and you can see that there's snowfall on our screen. I would be delighted if there was snowfall at Funky Rainbow's office, but there's some lights all around over here, and no snow falling on my head at the moment. But that's how much, we are able to influence the seasons. We're going to take a break for a month. We need to plan themes, we need to procure books, and that's been a huge challenge in the last couple of months, especially after the second lockdown lifted. Books so much slower in coming in, and publishers and distributors dealing with the challenges of shipping books to us. So we're going to take a 1 month break. We'll be back in September with season 3 of Book Bazaar, and we promise you some really scintillating themes. I would like every one of you have our WhatsApp number, the official WhatsApp number, which is 99004 95665. Please suggest themes that you may want to see. We're absolutely delighted to consider your suggestions and try to curate books around some of those suggestions that we receive. But can Team Funky Rainbow actually just hunker down and do nothing and maybe visit Kashmir and get a good night's sleep? Well, that doesn't happen very easily at Funky Rainbow. But what we're going to do is to do a 4 week we're going to do 4 weeks of activity sessions for children every Saturday in August, to celebrate this beautiful country that we all live in, India. Sham, if you could put up the India activity poster. This is, a 4 weeks of stories, activities, art, and craft, all centric on India every Saturday. These are paid sessions, and this is a family event. It's a live streaming event meant for children above the age of 5. But if younger kids want to listen into the stories and do the art and crafts, you can easily sit in with them and enjoy it. This is all about knowing India, going India in the Independence Month. There's stories, art and craft from Muttama, from Greystroke, from author storyteller Vijay Lakshmi Nagaraj, and some puzzles and quizzes and riddles from me. I can see Joanne Saldana saying, "Good morning, Funkies. I'm a bit tardy, but happy to be here. Delighted that you're here, Joanne Saldana." And she says, "India is such a wonderful idea." Yes, perhaps, like right now. So we'll put out the details on India. Preeti Ramchandran, good morning, saying, "Just when I was going to say we'll miss you in August, you bring up a new avatar. Looking forward to exploring India with you all." Absolutely. The team at Funky Rainbow simply doesn't know what it means to hunker down and stay quiet. It doesn't happen at Funky Rainbow at all. Perhaps only when we have our noses in books. But yes, we'll put out the announcements on India after the bazaar is done. Do consider subscribing to it with your children. We promise you loads of fun and loads of discovery about this beautiful country that we are living in. Ritvika Roy saying we'll share it on childhood and children's literature studies in South Asia. Thank you. You've been so hugely supportive of everything we do by sharing our information here, there, everywhere. With that announcement, I will start off with my first recommendation for the day, which is this wonderful picture book, really a laugh out loud kind of picture book, published by Tulika, written by Sandhya Rao. This one is called Mazu Mazu, a folk tale from Kashmir, written, like I said, by that wonderful writer editor Sandhya Rao and illustrated by Srividya Natarajan. What is the story of Mazu Mazu about? It is so beautifully set in Kashmir and tells the story of this couple, Nazneen and her husband Makbul Butt, who comes running home one day and he's very late. So Nazneen is really quite miffed. She's almost putting the children to bed, or she's put the children to bed, and that's when Makbul Butt comes running into the house. And she says, "You're so late." And he says, "Yeah, yeah, yes, I know I'm late, but see what I've brought." And he opens this package, and you can see that picture, these beautiful, lovely baby brinjals that absolutely tumble out of that packet. Yes? Okay, okay, all right. Is this all right, Cham? Yeah, okay. So, these beautiful baby brinjals that tumble out of the package. Now, she is just stunned because she says, "I wanted to make Mars." And she stops, Marzwangan kurma, Marzwangan kurma. And she's like, "My God, how did you know I needed these round, smooth, purple brinjals to make the Marzwangan kurma?" And they, of course, tuck their children to bed and decide how they are going to enjoy this delectable Marzwangan kurma that Nazneen hasn't made in a long, long time. And of course, the next morning, once they've decided when they're going to do this, they are eating. And the story has so many beautiful references to Kashmir. The kids, Fahima and Firdaus, they finish their breakfast, which is homemade bread dipped in noon chai, which is poured out of a samovar. And of course, they all run off to school and to work, and Nazneen starts to make the Marzwangan kurma. But it's a fragrant kurma, and this family wants to just enjoy that on their own. But I tell you, food smells, they wander here, there, everywhere, much like the books from Funky Rainbow. And they have unexpected guests who land up. What happens? What does Nazneen do? And are they able to only eat the Marzwangan kurma themselves, or do they end up having to share it with everyone and anyone who loves a free meal? Beautiful illustrations too. I can see Sunila Kulkarni Gupta saying, "Good morning, Team FR. Missed all what you said, missed the things that you said earlier, but just loving the subject today, Kashmir, and couldn't stay away. We know what a huge supporter you are, Sunila. So whatever our subject, you are always there in support." Rupa Baliga saying, "What a lovely book to start the bazaar with. One of our favorites. Indeed, indeed, it is." And the illustrations, they follow a traditional embroidery style, a chain stitching style that's found on clothes, on clothes that Kashmiris wear, called the kasida style of embroidery. The illustrations drawing heavily from that style of embroidery. It's such a beautiful book. We would recommend it for 4+ year olds, and this one is priced at 95 rupees. we move, of course, with the whiff of that salted noon chai, which we have absolutely, which has my mouth watering, because I'm not drinking noon chai, I'm afraid, just good old water. But we move on to a beautiful book that came onto our shelves not so very long ago, Noon Chai and a Story by Aditi Rao and illustrated by Ghazala Kadri. What a lovely story this is about the power of books and reading. And this is what I said when I sorry, this way. Okay, Asham's giving me some instructions on how I need to show the books, guys. And I, of course, am not so clued into these things, so we may be interrupted once or twice. But the thing is, this is exactly what I was saying when I started the bazaar. Books for our youngest readers with nuances of of the political situation in Kashmir, social situation in Kashmir. It is a happy story. It is a story about book love and about the power of reading and storybooks, really. But this story is set in Gurez, which is absolutely on the line of control. And I love that line where where the author says, in Gurez there are no storybooks, only lots and lots of snow. Of course, what is this all about? There is a young girl, and there is an uncle from far away who comes to her little town, and he introduces her, all Amia and her friends, to some wonderful to a storybook with lots of beautiful pictures. And of course, he has to leave after a while, and her sister Asmat Appa helps her pack up all those books and let uncle from far away take them back. That's where she says, in Gurez there are no storybooks, only lots and lots of snow. Of course, she has to come back home, and she sits down to do her homework, and she's thinking of that wonderful storybook, and how lovely if it would be if they had access to those storybooks. And she tells her dadi, her dedi, as Aditi Rao refers to her, saying, and dedi says, ah, well, I could help you. I may be able to help you. And of course, Amiya instantly saying, oh, you're so old. How can you help us? Dedi laughs like all good grandmothers do, right? Okay, shush, child. Let me unearth, the all the magic powers in my hand, or in my firan, perhaps. Like she's wearing a firan in the story, and she actually suggests to them that they can write and draw their own storybooks. And what a pleasurable pastime that is. Amia writes, her sister draws, Asmat Appa draws, and another new book is born. Of course, what happens in that story? I can see Hema Sarthi saying, awesome venture, thank you so much. And Asha Nehmaya, good morning to you, saying, love Noon Chai and the story of how libraries can be made. Indeed, what a heartwarming story it is. And, hinting gently at the conflict that people in Kashmir have to live with, and that has become a part of their everyday lives. But showing exactly why books and reading, they are the harbingers of hope and peace like nothing ever can be. It's such a fantastic story. We'd recommend it for 5+ year olds. Ghazal Kadri, who's illustrated it, is Kashmiri, and you can see little nuances of little Kashmiri motifs and icons all over the book. Many things that you will be able to recognize, as you're reading the story. This one we would recommend for 5+ year olds, and it's priced at 175 rupees. I can see Amita Malhotra saying, Noon Chai reminds me of Sadiq wants to stitch. And it has indeed reminded you of the next book in our collection, which is this wonderful book by Mamta Naini, written by Mamta Naini and illustrated by Nilofer Wadia, called Sadiq Wants to Stitch. Well, this is a story on, at so many wonderful levels. It works essentially because it's about a young boy called Sadiq who lives very close by with his mother to very close to the river Lidar, and it's the soft gurgling sounds of the rivers, and really what a Kashmiri feel that has. I mean, and we want children in this generation to know that, I mean, just that, those jewel blue lakes of Kashmir, that the icy white mountains, those chinar, leaves in red and yellow, and then when they're moving towards autumn, becoming red, they are colors that were just etched in my mind, having visited so many decades ago, basically. And like I said, for our generation, perhaps many of you have those wonderful memories of the colors of Kashmir. To children today who have perhaps not visited, these books can literally transport them to the midst of the beauty of Kashmir. Of course, so this story is set in the Bakarwal community, and they are carpet weavers. They live amidst the Pir Panjal mountains in Jammu and Kashmir. And Sadiq is a little boy who loves stitching colorful patterns on the rugs. On the carpets and on the rugs. But his ammi tells him that the boys in that community, they actually tend their goats and they don't stay at home and stitch. But we love Sadiq for the fact that he's determined to pursue his passion. So like I said, it's a book that could transports you to Kashmir with the beauty of its landscapes. It introduces you to a fading, and I think it's an almost dying shepherd craft, these rugs that the Bakarwal community makes. And Kara Details, who have published the book, giving you a note, at the end on this embroidery style and about the Bakarwals themselves. And what we love, it most for is the fact of how it defies gender norms. Intrepid Sadiq, what does he do to pursue his passion to stitch? It's a wonderful book. We'd recommend it for 5+ year olds. It's a handsome hardback edition priced at 399 rupees. Folks, our eighth birthday celebrations last week continue till this Saturday, till end of day today. And that 10% discount that we usually give everyone is 10 plus 8. So 18% discount that's valid till the end of day today. So if there are books that you enjoy in what we've recommended to you, do consider picking it up. Joanne Saldana saying, I witnessed this book turning one of the students who never read into a reader. My God, how lovely is that thought? It was a mirror to her, the power of a great book. So well said, Joanne Saldana. That's exactly what a good book can do. Amita Malhotra, one of my daughter's favorite books and mine too, beautifully delivers the message that you can do what you want and not what your gender allows. Absolutely. That's the message that I, really took home from the book. But yes, it's the beauty of Kashmir and this community that it's set in the midst of, that really transports the young reader into another world. My next recommendation is again a charming little book called Gulla and the Hangul, written by Mariam Karim Halawat and luminously illustrated by Proiti Roy. What a wonderful story this is. Again, all these books that are set in Kashmir, so set in the midst of these vast huge, awe-inspiring mountains, many of the protagonists, tending to sheeps and goats and taking them to graze in the mountains, giving us a sense of the people, what they do, and and of their lives. In this book too, Gulla is a young boy. He's 4 when the story begins, and he takes his goats, and I mean, he goes with his parents and takes the goats and sheep to graze in the mountains. And one of the things that comes through in the book, when Mariam's telling the story of Gulla, is it's not just, I mean, what are the things that Gulla is scared of? Maybe of bears and leopards. Will they attack and take away his cattle? I mean, the goats and the sheep, the terrible Ban Budhia. And you know what, there is that Ban Budhia myth, the old woman of the forest, in so many cultures and in so many states in India. And he's thinking, will the Banbudia come and take away his goats and sheep? But there's also one more thing that he's worried about: of men with guns. Just look at that subtle way in which the present situation of Kashmir is explained to our youngest readers. It's not an all pervasive theme in the book, but you do get a sense of the reality on the ground just by following Gulla, and by seeing what his life entails. So his mother always warns him, and you can see these wonderful illustrations by Proiti Roy. They really evoke the rugged, rocky charm of Kashmir so wonderfully. So every time Gulla goes, his mother will say, "Don't venture deep into the forest." But one day there is the hungul, the bird, I mean the animal, the state animal of Jammu and Kashmir, the beautiful hungul deer. He sees that the hungul deer is being chased by some wild dogs, and he wants to do everything to protect and rescue that hungul. So he runs into the forest, deeper and deeper and deeper into the forest. What happens to Gulla? It's such a wonderful story, folks, and so many layers of meaning that you can actually extract from a book like this, depending on which reader you're reading with, what age group of children you're reading it with. We'd recommend this one for 6+ year olds, but you can even read it with a child who's 8. I mean, picture books, I'm sure many of you watching know that something that you can dip into right through your lives. This one is published by Tulika, priced at 125 rupees, and we would recommend it for 6+ year olds. We have, of course, taken some liberties with our Kashmir theme, and we do have books, Jammu and Kashmir theme. We do have books that come to us from Ladakh as well, because in our heads they were, and they still are part of one big beautiful state. Never mind what lines have been drawn politically to separate them into union territories of Jammu and Kashmir and the union territory of Ladakh. At the moment, we do have books from Ladakh as well in our collection. And I know many of you love the next one that I'm going to recommend. And this is Bambu, the donkey who wouldn't budge. Such a great read this is, written by Sujata Padmanabhan, who's worked extensively in the region of Ladakh, in the area of conservation. This one illustrated by Madhuvanti Antarrajan and written wonderfully by Sujata Padmanabhan, takes you right into Ladakh, and where Bambu is a loving, playful donkey, and adored by the family. The little girl of that family, Bambu is just her favorite friend. This book has, it looks like a picture book, but it has a little bit more text. So we would say definitely 6, 7+ perhaps for you to read this one, but it's a story that even younger children will really enjoy listening to and will really identify with. And Padma and Bambu, really, really good friends. Now, what happens? The tourist season approaches, and the family finds Bambu is more and more reluctant to step out, to walk, to take people or loads from one place to the other. So Padma's dad gets a bit mad. He's like, we depend on Bambu for our livelihood and living, and he's not doing anything. And Padma is so worried that her father will sell Bambu off. But she decides that she's going to get to the nub of the matter, and discovers that there is an illness that plagues Bambu, and what is that illness? Well, I'm just going to give you a sneak peek into it. She discovers, in the most charming way that children do, in the intrepid way that children can find answers, she discovers that Bambu has night blindness. And what do they do? What does an intrepid child do to convert a weakness to a strength? Oh gosh, what a lovely story Bambu is. And I can see Joanne Saldana concurring, saying, gosh, Bambu is just such a precious read. It's absolutely another favorite. This one, published by Ekalavya, priced at 90 rupees. We would recommend that every home library, every school library has this wonderful book. I will move on to one more before I say hello, hi to a lot of friends who've joined us. And this one is, again, an old book in a new avatar, The Kashmiri Storyteller, by that master storyteller, Ruskin Bond. What is the story of the it's a clutch of stories, actually. And this one, written by Ruskin Bond, illustrated by Prasoon Mazumdar. It's set in a village, and there is Javed Khan mama I mean there is Javed Khan, who is a Kashmiri, in Landur Bazaar. Landur, where the town made absolutely famous by Ruskin Bond. Javed Khan has a Kashmiri store, a Kashmiri himself, and he's always, to the people who come to his store and to the children who gather around at that store, he's enthralling them with stories of Kashmir, princes and kings, fairies and magic. There are all kinds of charming stories that he's able to narrate to his young audience, and the children. They all come, they all sit around at the store, and they listen to these enchanting tales. The children, I think there are, yeah, Shashi, Anil, Madhu, and Vijay, all listening to Javed Khan's stories of the monkey bride, of the man who's was swallowed up by a mosquito. That story is just hilarious. The bent up double beggar who's seen a ghost, and wonderful stories of Kashmir and beyond. What I really loved in Ruskin Bond's introduction, and in this new edition, that's what he says, is that when he sent the book to be, for submission, one of his publishers, and this is very, very many decades ago, I'm sure, said that, well, the stories work wonderfully on their own, but we don't want Javed Khan, the storyteller, as the central character of the book. And Bond said, never mind, I'm not publishing the book without Javed Khan as the central characters. As luck would have it, some years later, or rather many, decades later, his publisher, when he was meeting with one of his publishers, he was absolutely interested in the book. And he says the children, all the children that he's referring to in the stories, little Vijay, he says little Vijay is now in his 50s, while pigtailed Shashi is a grandmother herself. And I'm really hoping that they are all telling their grandchildren, stories like Javed Khan does to all the children in this book. It's a beautiful illustrated chapter book, and we would recommend it for 7, 8+ year olds, really taking you to the misty hills of Kashmir. This one published by Penguin, priced at 399 rupees. Let me say a round of hellos and highs to all our friends before we move on to more recommendations. Yellara Pustaka, thank you so much for joining us week after week. You must wait till we talk about the new arrivals, because we are going to talk about your wonderful books in Kannada as part of our new arrivals segment. Arzu Rikhi, what a pleasure you've joined us. Dumaketu, what a pleasure that you're here, Teju. I'm sure there are many, many books that you can add to our collection as well. Reading Stars India, Pause for Perspective. Wow, that is a nice name if ever there was one. Yes, we would love to take that pause for perspective, and the bazaar break is perhaps just that pause for perspective. Aarti Mamta, so delighted to see you. I hope you caught our recommendation of Mamta's book, Sadik Wants to Stitch. Katha Kutuhala, lovely to see you here, Janvi. Khushbu Shah, Maya Ashwini, Ritesh, Parag Reads, Satya Shrujan Reddy, Satya Shrujan Reddy, Sanjana, Bindya Parvani, Anjani Rajagopal, Sarvam Kali. What a pleasure. Thank you so much for joining us. Ramendra Kumar, always lovely to see you at our bazaar bright and early. Ritvika Roy, Jyoti Narayanan, Tanushri Singh, Joanne Saldana, Preeti Ramchandran, Sunila Kulkarni Gupte, Rupa Baliga, Asha Nehmaya, Hema Sarthi, Amita Malhotra, Vikas Vinit Jha, how lovely you've joined us all the way from Calcutta. I think that's where you are now, aren't you, Vikas? Lovely to have a storyteller join us. Sarvam Kali, Trina Maitra, such a pleasure to see you as well. And of course, our co-jasus, Sayoni Basu. Thank you so much for joining us. Sayoni, we began the bazaar when Muttama was saying, how did we do the jasusi on a new book that's not been released yet? And I did tell her, editors often making great jasuses. Thank you so much for sending that, information about the wonderful book by Divya Arya, Postbox Kashmir, our way. It's thanks to that we have her, as a guest at the bazaar. And I can't tell you how thrilled I was when the publishers sent us, a copy of the book to read before we did this bazaar. So a big thank you going out to our main jasus in this. Mutama sending you many emoji kisses, and I shall let her send them to you. Vikas Vinijha saying lots of suggestions to buy new sets of books, always in every bazaar. Vikas. Archana Atri saying, hi, Funkies. What a pleasure you are here, Archana. And with that, we will continue with a couple of more recommendations on the theme of Kashmir. There's again Sujata Padmanabhan, like I said, who has worked extensively in Ladakh. And for us, really, never mind the political lines that get drawn between states. I mean, this one still, Ladakh, still such an integral part of the whole Jammu and Kashmir experience in our heads. This one, again, published by Kalpavriksha. You do know the ghost of the mountains, what the ghost of the mountains is really, isn't it? And Sujata taking you right into a small village, the small village of Ang, in the midst of the Himalayan mountains. And you know what, they have an unexpected visitor one day, which is really the ghost of the mountains. And the villagers, they get scared, some of them get angry, and they decide that they must do away with this visitor. But thank God for children, thank God for children who have their heart in absolutely the right places, because there's one young boy in the village who decides that the ghost of the mountain must be saved and spared at any cost. I'm not going to tell you, what that ghost of the mountain is, but I think many of you already know a wonderful story of conservation, ecology, and the love that the people of the mountains have for nature. This one published by Kalpavriksha, we would recommend it again, 8 plus, because you can see it's quite heavy on text. 8+ year olds, we would say typically, but if your children are reading, even younger children are reading at this level, certainly would work. This one priced at 100 rupees and published by Kalpavriksha. We do have this book from CBT. I can see Joanne Saldana saying a wonderful story. I really love these Kalpavriksha books. Indeed, really weaving in story and conservation and the environment so beautifully together. So the Kalpavriksha books, a real treat on our bookshelves as well. We move on to our next book, which is Devika Rangachari's, and I can see Vijay Lakshmi Nagraj Mutama saying, Vijay has joined us. What a pleasure. Thank you for joining us. Kashmir, so close to her heart, she says, because General Nagraj, her husband, was posted there and she's lived there for very many years. It's just the way she talks about Kashmir and the love that she has for that place, absolutely infectious. We are delighted to welcome you. And we do know that Paro Anand, who's going to join us a little later in the show, her book, No Guns at My Son's Funeral, which is, an iconic book on Kashmir, begins with a thank you to Lieutenant General, at that point, Lieutenant General Nagraj and Vijay Lakshmi Nagraj, for starting me off in the first place. So, obviously, Vijay, you have facilitated some wonderful stories to come out of Kashmir. And of course, that wonderful promise that we always, always want to hear, promising to take us to Kashmir one day. Indeed, our books in Kashmir. Imagine if we could host a bazaar of Dal Lake. My God, it would just be heaven, heaven on earth. That's exactly what it would be. Thank you, Vijay. And we're keeping fingers crossed and hoping that we'll go past meeting online to meeting in the real world sometime soon. Kushbu Sa saying that her son is also watching and he wants us to call out his name. I'm so delighted, Rishu, that you are watching us. All of us from Team Funky Rainbow say a big hello to you, Rishu. And we know lots of adults, as you can hear the loud hellos from all around. Always, always many adults watching Book Bazaar issue. So when the children come, it's truly special. It feels for us, it feels like we are in heaven when children write in and say this. Thank you so much for watching with your mum, Rishu. To come back to the book that I was recommending, Devika Rangachari's Stories from Rajatarangini, Tales of Kashmir. So, the Rajatarangini actually means the river of kings. And these stories, the stories that Devika has retold in an older avatar, I'm sure, in her early career, are the stories by Kalhana, who was a famous 11th century Kashmiri poet and singer. And of course, these stories that she has retold, stories of kings and queens. I mean, he was Kalhana, a historian and a poet, and stories that feature characters like Krishna, Brahma, Vishnu, Shiva. But not just that, these stories do bring to light the political, social, economic conditions of his time, giving us a glimpse into Kashmir way back in the 11th century. Scintillating folk tales retold by Devika Rangachari, you can see, published by CBT, really taking you back to Kashmir of yore. I mean, and so there are stories of palace intrigues, and there are stories of conspiracies and scandals in forests and between the kings and queens. Quite a nice collection of stories to read on Kashmir, and with a very different flavor, because I'm sure this was published very, very many decades ago. This one published by CBT, priced at 140 rupees. We have two more, coming up. Ritvika Roy saying, also Devika Rangachari's Queen of Ice. Indeed, how can it not feature on our list, Ritvika Roy? I mean, we love that book by Devika Rangachari, and we hope it's gone as far as Kashmir and even beyond from Funky Rainbow, because that's how much of a favorite it is for all of us on the team. Divya Purandar saying, hi, nice to join the bazaar after a while. Very good recommendations on Kashmir. Utterly delighted to see you here, Divya. And thank you so much for joining us and cheering us on. Our next set of books, two by Deepak Dalal, that are set in Ladakh. It's the Vikramaditya series, and we know they are so popular, these stories. There is the Ladakh adventure, and there is the Ladakh adventure, which, the picture up on screen, and there is the snow leopard, if I should say, the ghost of the mountains. There are the characters Vikram and Aditya who make an appearance in all the books, and Deepak Dalal has set them, this whole clutch of books, maybe six, eight of them, is it? Maybe six, eight of those books, perhaps, all set in different locations, ranging from Ranthambore to the Andamans, to the Sahyadri Mountains. But these two specifically set in Ladakh. And in this one, in the Ladakh adventure, Vikram and Aditya, meet a young Tibetan boy called Sering, who, accompanies them when they are traveling, through this barren frontier of India. And of course, there is an animal that needs to be saved, as is, every book of Deepak Dalal that calls for the conservation of different species that share the planet with us. Now, Sering, who is Sering? Why is, how has he, why is he accompanying Vikram and Aditya? And what happens? What is that mystery that unfolds, in which they have to chase a group of men up and down the mountains? The cover will give you some clues, but you've got to read, this fantastic tale set in the nestled in the Himalayas to know what animal, what species is getting is getting conserved or protected in this book. Ditto with the snow leopard, which is, of course, the story of protecting a snow leopard and her cub. And again, Vikram and Aditya in Ladakh, and this time befriending a girl called Caroline, who joins them on their adventures in the midst of the majestic mountains, that Ladakh is situated in the midst of. Fantastic books. We do know you almost go on that trail, and you're hoping that at the end of it, you too will see the elusive snow leopard. We know how hard it is to find and actually see the snow leopard. And I do recall one time that Deepak was here in Bangalore talking about how many days him and his team spent trying to spot the elusive snow leopard, and enduring the freezing cold, but that magnificent sight warming the cockles of your heart enough to get on this adventure. So for all of you parents, teachers, librarians watching, you should know that these books are great reads before you travel anywhere. They give you so much of information about the flora, fauna, and the natural beauty of the locations that they are set in. And Deepak Dalal, really, his heart deeply in conservation. I can see Sunila saying, fabulous book, Snow Leopard. Deepak Dalal is so good, especially with his different themes. Absolutely right, Sunila. And Preeti Ramchandran saying, Guhan is so very excited to hear about a mystery series with a focus on animals and birds across India's different habitats. We stumbled upon the first of this on FR's website with the Paradise Flycatcher, and we're looking to read the whole Mongol series. Yes, that's the Feather Tail series, which focuses on different birds. And this one, the Vikramaditya series, set in different locations, like I said, Ranthambore, and two books based in the Andamans, two books in the Sahyadris, two in Ladakh, and one in Lakshadweep, deep under the ocean in Lakshadweep. Fantastic set of books published by Penguin, priced at one at 250 rupees and one at 199 rupees. Folks, all these books we're recommending up in our on our website www.funkyrainbow.com. Please click on the tab that says Book Bazaar. The first one that comes, I mean, the first drop down menu will be Kashmir. And this I mean, the books that we are recommending and many others that we're not able to talk about in that collection, do consider picking it up from Funky Rainbow if you enjoy some of these recommendations. We would recommend Deepak Dalal's books for 10 plus year olds. The Feathertail series work for slightly younger readers, this one for 10 plus year olds, but you are the better judges of what your children can read. Our next recommendation, too, again, a book that came to us not so long ago, Kashmir, Kashmir, by that marvelous storyteller, Deepa Agarwal. And this one, absolutely, set at, at a time when the uncertainties of the lockdown were clamped on Kashmir as well. And the protagonists of the book, Humra and Zainab, there are different stories in the collection. So different Kashmiri children, Humra, Zainab, Rahman, Atharva. What happens to them? What happens to life when you're living in a conflict zone? What happens when political lines get drawn, and people who were friends at one time can't remain friends for no rhyme or reason, for no good rhyme or reason? Deepa very sensitively explores the subtle nuances. I mean, there are a mix of stories, happy stories, stories that are fraught with the fear of living under lockdown and curfew in Kashmir. Stories that reflect the cold landscape, the turbulence of life in Kashmir, and Deepa telling these stories so poetically, so sensitively, and opening the eyes of young adult readers. We'd recommend the book for 12 plus year olds. I can see Shakir Nayak saying, "This is a very good and helpful video, good analysis. I'm a researcher in the very same field." Wonderful to hear that, Shakir. Thank you so much for joining us. You can see how many children's books, these are, when we say children's books, we mean them for children, starting from really newborn babies, going up to the age of 18, which means many of these books to be read by adults as well. It's the thing that we love to do at Funky Rainbow, make intersections between, find those intersections between books and just about anything and everything in the world around us, especially children's books. And it's remarkable how much we have discovered ourselves in the last 1.5 years, many of you helping us along that way. Asha Nehme is saying, such a wonderful collection by Deepa Agarwal. Indeed, Kashmir, Kashmir. The warmth of these stories, really, and warming the cockles of your heart and giving you a peek into the beauty as well as the uncertainty that absolutely plagues Kashmir, and the fact that it is a troubled paradise today. And many stories that you will identify it, of family, friendship, courage that needs to be demonstrated in the face of all of the violence and the turbulence that you see in the valley. We would highly recommend this one for 12 plus year olds. And I think one of my favorite stories in this collection is definitely Run Zainab Run, which I thoroughly enjoyed reading, as did I, my Kashmir Diary. Like I said, a collection of short stories priced at 295 rupees, published by Scholastic. We have just a clutch of more books before we quickly, show some of our new arrivals and then welcome our guests for the show, because there's a lots of things to talk about with both Paru Anand and Divya Arya. So I'll just quickly run through a clutch of more recommendations. This one too, The House That Spoke, written by Zuni Chopra, is a book that we'd recommend for young adults. This is a story of 14-year-old Zoon Razdan, and there is just something extraordinary about the house that she and her family have inherited. I mean, one, it is of course in Kashmir, and she has, along with that house, inherited some deep, dark, ghostly kind of secrets. Now, just before that 15th, her 15th birthday, she realizes that it's not just a house that is full of memories, it's also a house full of grim secrets. And as she goes on to uncover these secrets, you know, Kashmir just comes alive to the reader. And not just the colors of Kashmir, the magic of Kashmir, the beauty of Kashmir, and the problems that plague Kashmir, that absolutely come alive in this cracker of a book. And I just love this die cut cover. You can see that it has House That Spoke as a die cut cover, which is then rests against a page to form this beautiful, evocative, lush story. And it is a spooky story in in a way. Again, we'd recommend this for 13, 14 plus year olds. It's a tense book at times. It's a you're on the edge when she's trying to solve or uncover the grim secrets in the house, which are ghostly secrets. And you are absolutely transported to Kashmir when she reimagines the beauty of that place. This one, published by Penguin, priced at 299 rupees. Definitely a recommended read. And we do know, I think, that Zuni Chopra is Vidhu Vinod Chopra's daughter, and lovely to see that she has written a book quite young. I think she was when she wrote this book herself. I'm not exactly sure whether she was 16 or 17 herself when she wrote the book, but it is really a wonderful one to read on Kashmir. Ritvika Roy, of course, Queen of Ice, can't go off without recommending that wonderful book on the story of Digda, the lame princess of Kashmir. We've spoken about it so many times in so many bazaars about this ruler of Kashmir who's really ambitious, ruthlessly ambitious, and wants to get on the throne of Kashmir, even if her father would very much want to have his son get on the throne of Kashmir. She's ruthless, she's ambitious, she wants to rewrite history, and Devika Rangachari brings alive 10th century Kashmir so beautifully, so magnificently with her research, and while telling the compelling tale of a princess who's been bullied and despised and discriminated against, but who decides that she is going to rise absolutely to the top and get on the throne of Kashmir. It's truly one of India's finest young adult novels. And this book, I mean, the first in a series of 3 books as of now. There's also Queen of Earth and Queen of Fire, but this one, Queen of Ice, absolutely set in Kashmir. Published by Duckbill and priced at 299 rupees. Quickly, a graphic novel, which I know lots of young adults enjoy reading graphic novels. And this one, called Munnu by Malik Sajad. Munnu, a boy from Kashmir, written and illustrated by Malik Sajad. And you can see that it is a graphic novel. Is the story of himself. Actually, he is the 7-year-old Munnu growing up in the Indian part of Kashmir, and of course his life entirely. You can see this fantastic graphic novel format, so reminiscent of the way Mouse is done as well. This one, life revolves around Munnu's family, his mother, his father, his sister Shehnaz, his brothers Ali and sorry, Adil and Akhtar. And it also revolves on around two of Munnu's favorite things, sugar and drawing. But this is Kashmir. In the book, it's Kashmir of the 1990s. And like I said, when the bazaar began, that region was just torn apart by violence, conflict, terrorism. And what does that do to Munnu? His school is shut, he can't go out and meet his friends. Familiar familiar themes for all of us today. And living in the midst of mixed communities, the communal tensions that erupt in the place. It's a wonderful graphic novel. We would recommend it for all young adults and for all adults who want to discover um, what it is for children to grow up in the midst of conflict. It is a boy's coming of age story, of course, and it's a warm memoir, but gives us such a wonderful insight into growing up in a conflict ridden area. This one, published by HarperCollins, is priced at 799 rupees. Well worth it, folks. For those of you who'd like it, do avail our birthday discount of 18% to pick it up. It's absolutely worth it's absolutely worth a read or three. Very, very similarly, in just that vein, and we are just quickly going to make some recommendations for, let's say, this book I would say would work for 17, 16, 17 plus, but for all adults. I just read it 2 weeks ago. It's pretty new. Farah Bashir's book, Rumors of Spring. It's in the lines of Munnu. It's about a girlhood in Kashmir. It's really an extraordinary memoir in more ways than one. And I caught a couple of conversations with her at different lit fests that were happening online, again in the 1990s. So you can see what an impact that had, the terrorism and the disruption in the lives of everyday people, especially of the children in Kashmir. You can see the deep impact that it had on children growing up, many of whom have grown up and written these fantastic books. So, this one, where Farah Bashir talks about her own childhood, it's heartbreaking in more ways than one. There's breathtaking beauty almost on every page, and also that very real feeling of terror, of living where you don't know what's going to happen to your life the next hour. Really a fantastic memoir of growing up in Kashmir. And it's, I think, in many of these books, a brave call for a sense of justice to prevail on that region. That's what Farah Bashir's book leaves you with. Finally, this one, priced at 499 rupees, a must read. I'd say 17 plus year olds, even 16, if you think they're reading at that level, but certainly for all adults. And of course, finally, two books for adults, two books that just opened our eyes to the stories in Kashmir, two, I mean, heartbreaking, heart wrenching books telling the stories from two different perspectives. I'd recommend these reads for all adults who are watching this show. It really gives you an insight into what violence does to our lives. There's Basharat Peers, and I think, I mean, I'm not surprised it's won so many awards. The Vodafone Crossword Award for Best Book, Curfewed Night. It's just a brutally honest story of growing up in Kashmir in 1989, and the violence that how religious violence just cuts your life, through your life in ways that you can't even ever imagine. It's evocative, and the purpose of these books is to, one, to tell us that, it's, is it that paradise that we imagine Kashmir to be? What can political dispensations do to the lives of people who live and work and love and who have made their homes in these places, really. This one, uh, truly opening my eyes. It's harrowing. So, be prepared to read that, the tumultuous history of the Muslims in Kashmir. And this one, as a contrast, Rahul Pandita's Our Moon Has Blood Clots, a memoir of a lost home in Kashmir, telling exactly that, a similar story from the side of the Kashmiri Pandits. And how they were chased away from their homes, that whole feeling of history, of home, of loss. I think these are just splendid books that all adults must read to get perspectives on two perspectives on Kashmir. And I'm sure you'll go back home, I'm sure you'll come away thinking that we should do everything that we can, that we possibly can, to take away violence from our lives and from our children's lives. Both of these published by Penguin, one priced at 350 rupees and one priced at 399 rupees. Those were a clutch of our recommendations. We do know, we have all of Paro Anand's books, and like I said when I began, she carries a piece of Kashmir in her heart, and it has come out in so many of her books. I'll just quickly get on to telling you about Paro's Kashmir books, but before we do that, we'll say hello to our guests. Shall I? Both guests are here, but I'll just quickly, run past the new arrivals. I know we never have time for that ever at the end, so I'm just quickly going to show you a clutch of them before we say hello to our guests for the day and start off on what promises to be a really scintillating conversation. There is a box of books on Gopi, Sudhamurthy's famous character Gopi, a box of little books on ABC's countings, colors and numbers, meant for our youngest readers. It's a box of 10 books, and I'm not sure what the price is, but it'll be up on Funky Rainbow. We are delighted to welcome. Muttama tells me that the price of that box of 10 board books for our youngest readers is priced at 899 rupees. We are delighted to welcome a new publisher on board, Yellara Pustaka, who sent us just some weeks ago these two teeny tiny, charming little board books for our youngest readers in Kannada. And it gives us so much pleasure to bring books in Indian languages into Funky Rainbow's bookshelves. And we really hope two books that they sent, and then immediately after, two more that they sent us. We hope, Yellara Pustaka, that there are lots and lots of wonderful books from your stable that come into Funky Rainbow's bookshelves. So attractively priced, these books in Kannada. The board books are at 140 rupees, and these two books at 65 and 85 rupees. Really, thank you so much for doing some lovely books on vegetables, on reading and books that you can see, and about nature in the book Seed for our young readers in Kannada. Our next arrivals are an eternal favorite character at Funky Rainbow, Gajapati Kulapati, and this super selling series now has an activity book. You can see there's a color, count, and create activity book, all centric around that beloved, absolutely funny, hilarious elephant, Gajapati Kulapati. So this is called Gajapati Kulapati's Big Day. And I think for all you fans out there, especially for our youngest readers, you're going to enjoy doing these activities. Muttama gesturing, saying, "What do you mean, youngest readers?" Like almost like she's going to pounce upon me. That this is for readers of all ages, all fans of Gajapati. And there's another one that came out from Tulika, which is a writing exercise book done by Sandhya Rao. Jump right in, a scrapbook of creative writing, based on several wonderful books that she has put together for Tulika. And you can see many of these we recognize: My Mother's Sari, Ikki Dokki, Kolaba, In Bon Bibi's Forest, Sunu Sunu Snail, Zakir. I think this is the kind of activity book that all little budding writers will enjoy considerably. So, two activity books from Tulika. I can see Sunila saying, Joanne, Sunila, and Shayoni saying, yay for new publishers. And we love that Kannada is being transcribed as Canada. But of course, what would you expect from Facebook except transcribing it wrongly? I've got to say this, I have to share this bit of, this. Hilarious anecdote with you. We tried to activate the Facebook shop some weeks ago, putting in some 20 books into the Facebook shop to see if people could buy books right out of Facebook. And of course, the very next day, some of the books that we put in were Catch That Crocodile by Anushka Ravishankar. We put in a book, I remember, on Guru Nanak, and we put in, different books, different animal books. Smack next day comes a mail right into Funky Rainbow's inbox saying, I'm afraid you can't put objects of animal trading up on Facebook. You can't have, you can't promote smoking and tobacco on Facebook. And I was like, cool, what have we done to promote smoking and tobacco? So the animals that we were trading in were Catch That Crocodile from Anushka Ravishankar's delightful book for children. And the smoking and tobacco was Guru Nanak with his hand in this pose, basically, which Facebook's algorithms thought was him smoking. Ah, well, here's why you should never trust algorithms, folks. Trust your local independent booksellers to find you the right kind of book. Because if you didn't get Anushka Ravishankar's Catch That Crocodile, your library would be the poorer for it, definitely. And I can see Joanne Saldana. Of course, we're doing this show over Facebook. We just wish their algorithms would get smarter. Joanne Saldana saying, "Oh my God," and Shayoni saying, "That's such an excellent story." Yes, always rooting for indie publishers. Very, very. For independent bookstores. Sorry. And very quickly, I'm just going to show you these two new books from Ruskin Bond: Tales from My Heart, out by Red Panda, a new arrival, and The Best Short Stories Ever by Terry O'Brien. We haven't read any of these ones, folks, but they're all up on our new arrivals, and we hope to catch up with all our reading in the month that we're going to take a break in. With that, we'll say hello to our guests. I know many of you waiting to welcome them onto the show. Sham, can we have Paru Anand and Divya Arya join us at the Book Bazaar? Yay! Elbow, ever, right? All of those ways. But you can see that band Baja Bharat always accompanying creators of children's books at Funky Rainbow. The whole team welcomes you, Paro. We know you're back from a doctor's visit, and we're so glad that you've made the time to join us despite having to do that visit. And Divya Arya, who we had the pleasure of getting to know just 2 days ago, thanks to Jasusi by Shayani Basu and me, on uncovering a book that's not been released yet, folks. I want to say it over and over again that you're hearing about Divya Arya's book, Postbox Kashmir, at Funky Rainbow. And please tell the world that you heard it for the first time through us, because that makes us happy as hell.
That makes
We
me
will
happy
talk to the
too.
two of them, but very quick introduction, for all of you watching. I know our friends on Instagram, we can't stream this conversation live on Instagram, so you need to switch to our YouTube or Facebook pages to catch the conversation. Please do come in. Two wonderful creators of books joining us today. Paru Anand, I have to say, there was one descriptor of her that I read, I think, on the Penguin website that says a fearless writer and performance storyteller with a big heart. There's really no words that can summarize it better than just, that. Paro writing for children and young adults for so many decades now. Someone that I had the pleasure of reading in a magazine like Target. I can't tell you how thrilled I am that you're here at a bazaar this morning, Paru. Divya Arya, done her, and it's a lovely contrast. Divya's just done her first book, and I think from reading that, I think it holds the promise of several more books from her pen as well. An award winning journalist from the BBC. The reason that the two of them are here is Paro, as I said, carries a piece of Kashmir in her heart everywhere and has several books on Kashmir, starting with the iconic No Guns at My Son's Funeral, written way back in 2001. And I think pretty much spawning the genre of YA writing in India. This fantastic story of a young boy called Aftab, in growing up in Kashmir, who's lured away to becoming a terrorist. A book that followed soon after, Weed by Paro, also set in Kashmir, about a young boy called Umar, and his growing up with his family in a time of conflict in Kashmir. There is, of course, Like Smoke, which has come out in several avatars. I think was it Wild Child and Other Stories first, Paro? I remember reading it like that. And then it became maybe something from I'm Not Butter Chicken as well, perhaps, making their way into this collection and this set of stories for teenagers, some of which are set in Kashmir. Absolutely a scintillating read. And her latest Kashmir one, of course, being Nomad's Land, this wonderful story of two teenage girls growing up in Kashmir. You can see how much Paro has several other books to her credit. I'm sure, Sham, we can spend a whole bazaar only on Paro Anand's books. That's how much she's written for all of us. I can see so many people welcoming both of you, Paro and Divya. Asha Nehemiah saying, welcome, Paro and Divya Arya. So looking forward to hearing about your books. Shayoni Basu saying, hello, Paro and Divya. Ramendra Kumar, Vijay Lakshmi Nagaraj. Ramendra Kumar saying, No Guns is one of the most soul-searing books I've ever read. It was my son Aniket's favorite book when he was 13, and I think it still is when he's 26 now. So you can see how much of an impact Paro's writing has had on children and adults. Divya Arya, new kid on the block, but whose fantastic book, Postbox Kashmir, which is going to be released on the 5th of August to commemorate the second year, the second anniversary of, Article 370 being used in Kashmir, and, the special status of Kashmir being revoked. She has a journalist's eye, and her book, Postbox Kashmir, which we have up on pre-order at Funky Rainbow Folk. So please do pick it up. The distributor promises to reach it to us as soon as possible, and you can be sure that we'll move mountains in Kashmir or the oceans in Kanyakumari to get it very, very quickly on our bookshelves. The story of two teenagers, a book of nonfiction of two teenagers, writing letters to each other against the backdrop of the violence and turbulence in Kashmir. Preeti Ramchandran saying, Sunila Kulkarni saying, so thrilled to say hello to Paro and Divya. And Preeti Ramchandran saying, an honor to listen to accomplished authors like Paro and in the FR Bazaar. Archana Atri saying that her nerds absolutely loved No Guns at My Son's Funeral. I'm going to start off with my questions because I know all our audience will absolutely, will be ready to send compliments your way right through the show. But let's talk about what we wanted to chat about, Paro and Divya. Paro, my question for you is that you've written so many books of fiction set in Kashmir, starting with the path-breaking No Guns at My Son's Funeral, published way back in 2001. You then have visited the region over and over again in weed and in like smoke, in nomad's land. Why is this fascination for Kashmir? What is responsible for this fascination with Kashmir?
I, of course, went first to Kashmir on holiday. I went there on my honeymoon, and it was this idyllic, uh, beautiful paradisical world. Uh, and then I was invited by the Rajiv Gandhi
Just one second, I can't hear.
to do some work there, first in Jammu and then in the valley. And suddenly that paradise had disappeared. And it was like a completely different place. And it was difficult for my mind to wrap itself around this. First time I went with the Rajiv Gandhi Foundation, we were staying in a hospital where the Bakarwals and they, they were in their hospital, boys' hospital. And we were putting the Kashmiri Hindu uh, children who had fled when they were infants. They had no memory of Kashmir. And we were bringing them back for the first time and putting them together with Muslim children. And the complete hatred that there was between how scarred these children were, their daughters, the children, uh, that they had all lost their fathers. Some lost multiple family members, some had been witness to the murders. Whether it was, these were all actually killed by parents and so these were very scarred young children. And our brief was just let them have fun. Uh, Nothing like huge researching, just halka halka let them have fun. Children couldn't, they didn't know how.
Oh gosh.
So I exercise because each child had common exercise. We've all done it. It didn't work. Children didn't know what a story was. They didn't know what imagination was. They were frozen. And so I asked them to write something.
Paru, just 1 second. Sorry, 1 second, Paru. People saying they're not able to hear you very well. Is it possible to, just come up a little closer, perhaps, and speak? So sorry. Yeah,
Is this
please continue. But we're only seeing. Anyways, yeah, you can continue, Paru. Sorry for breaking your train of thought. Yeah.
so? I hope it's better now. So just to quickly recap, that working with the kids and brief was to just let them have fun. They couldn't have fun. They didn't know how. What fun was. Um, and so I gave them the story starter, Achani Zindagi Mein. Suddenly, and uh, out of 50 orphan children, 48 of them wrote about the hadsa, the moment when they lost their parent, the father was killed. And it was such a moving experience for us, of course, but for them. And
Yeah.
the hatred between the Hindu and Muslim children
Yes.
suddenly melted because it was the first time that they realized that both had lost. There were losses on both sides. And that was very moving. I also went to Kashmir with Vijay Nagaraj.
Yes.
Her husband had kindly hosted us in Baramulla as part of the longest newspaper in the world project. I am a world record holder. and so is Viti as part of that project. And there, what really came across was children wanted peace. None of them was supporting the violence. They only asked for peace. And that's where the connectivity with Kashmir started, went much deeper because I actually sort of adopted a young boy from the orphans project. He had lost his father and was in very deep trauma, and he and I really bonded. And so he's now married and is a young man in a job, but he's still my son. He calls me Ammi.
Ah, lovely, lovely. What a heartwarming story that is. But yes, my God, that love for Kashmir really sparkling through many of your books, many of your short stories as well, Paro. Divya, your debut book, Postbox Kashmir, which releases on the eve of the second anniversary, of the removal of Kashmir's special status. It explores the turbulence and violence in Kashmir through the eyes of two teenagers, Soumya in Delhi and Dua in Kashmir. Why did you choose the medium of non-fiction to tell the history and the present of a little known part of India, at least little known for contemporary readers?
I have thought about that myself, and I think it's hard to put my book in the category of nonfiction or fiction because it has elements of both. And this is my first act at writing a full length book, though, of course, I've been what I say, telling people stories in text, in TV, in radio formats for more than 15 years now. Uh, but with the book, which I feel is in some ways very, very immersive and a new experience for me as a journalist, I think the format almost chooses you.
Ah,
So, this, like it happens for many journalists, we begin with our stories, and then some of them have a potential to go deeper and be able to tell the story in more detail in all its nuances. And this is exactly how it happened with me. We thought we were reporting everything about Kashmir.
mhm.
And we were trying to do it from the perspective of people because that's a big thrust personally for me as well as for my organization BBC, where we feel that it's not just the geopolitics, it's not just the violence of how many terrorists were killed or how many armed forces were killed, or the intellectual question of the removal of special protections to armed forces, etc., etc. It is more about, or it is equally about how it's impacting people. And it was in that brainstorming that we thought we needed to hear from young people. And actually, when I was listening to Paro, I thought these are the same young people she would have met when they were much younger. And when I met them in like the last 3 years, they have become like teenagers. And yes, they want peace, but they also have lots of questions and they also fed a lot of history. So they carry a lot of baggage. And when we started this interaction of letters, this book is not just about Kashmir, it's about India as well. Because when we got this 15-year-old in Kashmir and a 15-year-old in Delhi to talk to each other, the tension was on both ends. The assumptions, the perceptions about what a Kashmiri is, about who somebody who has not lived in Kashmir is, how the rest of the country looks at them. There was a lot of baggage. And really, this book carries so much baggage.
Ah,
Pandemic. So, it's just energized me so much because the more I got to know these girls, they are curious and they are very open. And their open hearts is what led to a very rich conversation. Now, when Penguin approached me to write this as a book, and when I thought more about how to build on those letters that these girls have exchanged, I felt that they are touching upon so many complex issues. And like I said, they're coming with so much history, though with a very open mind. For anybody reading them, they need to know what's behind the questions they're asking each other in the letters. And what's the politics that has led us to where we are? Because I think history is really important. And I thought that is the rigor I can bring to it as a journalist. So it
yes.
became a happy marriage of what you could call fiction, though it's their lives, and what is non-fictional, which is, I think it's a guide to the modern history and politics of Kashmir and of India. So it the first half tells you more about Kashmir because that's just how organically their conversation is. When you start talking to a Kashmiri, it's about them because you know less and you have more assumptions about what their life is.
Yeah.
But when the conversation actually comes to sort of an equal point where you've established trust, you've become friends, they very fondly say that to each other, we're the best of friends. So they did a second round of letters, which happened after the abrogation. That's the second time they thought, oh, okay, we thought they should reach out and talk to each other again. And the second time, it was more about India. I think because the context had shifted, there was so much changing in the country. It was Indian government which had decided about the abrogation. So that's what the second half of the book does. It talks about how India is changing now and the fissures there. And the girl from Kashmir has more questions to the girl from Delhi, Soumya. So it really is an organic book. It chose its format and it chose its conversations. What I've tried to do is to give it some rigor, which is intellectual as well as rich in facts, and which I hope will help anyone reading it, not just young adults, adults as well, to shed some of their perceptions or at least get some context to why they think the way they do. So that's the answer to what you just asked.
Yeah, that was absolutely true. The number of things you discovered as an adult reading the book that you had, you assume that you know something about Kashmir, having read in different, newspapers or articles and online. Your book really did manage to, open even an adult reader's eyes. So I would recommend it certainly to all the adults who are watching. I think Paro's doggies are demanding attention as they rightfully should. But Paro, I wanted to ask you. Your fiction often has young protagonists who are caught in the throes of conflict and violence, and whose personal lives are deeply impacted by it. But in a sense, you're actually using fiction to focus on social and political issues that change people's lives forever. Why do you choose to do this, Paro?
I think, yeah, I would totally agree with, how you've written Postbox Kashmir is kind of how I have written some of these because it is reality fiction. So is it
Yes.
reality or is it fiction? It's a question I get asked so much. But I think my purpose, Vidya, I hope the voice is okay.
Better, Paro. Yes.
I think my purpose is always to try and, first of all, raise awareness, but also empower. I'd say that you're not hopeful. You're not hopeful right now, but there is hope, and you have to find it. And you're feeling that there's no solution. There is. You have to find it. Sometimes you have to construct it yourself. So I think that is the reason why I write what I do. Really, is to um, make kids see it, feel it, and do something about it.
You have that lovely phrase, Paro, which you put, I think, into Nomad's Land, saying that what you want children, the readers, to have is forever skies. And I think it just so beautifully describes why you write your books. And even when there's stories of children embroiled in political and social situations and conflicts, there is still so much hope in those books. um, Divya, your assessment when I was reading the book, its epistolary format, the fact that it's in the format of letters between two friends, it just keeps you turning the pages. It almost feels like a book of fiction when you're reading it. And there's this thing that we have so many books that or movies that say now that they're based on a true story. But writing non-fiction, so your book of non-fiction is literally based on a true story, isn't it, really?
Yes, and there were a lot of concerns when we started this project because these, uh, it's an insane idea, honestly, in this hyper connected world to actually request two teenagers to not look themselves up. So they didn't know each other before they became
Okay.
part of this project. So they were asked to stay away from Facebook, Instagram, which is their preferred medium, and approach the whole idea of this conversation as strangers, as pen pals. So the idea of letters, which like when I write the book, the first chapter is almost half of it is dedicated to the idea of letter writing, because that was very key, because it gives you distance. What is happening right now as we speak, you've got comments coming onto your Facebook page, right? That's how instant communication is, and that's why
Right.
there's a lot of reaction, but there's less of a pause, right? So we thought letters is going to provide that pause. So when you get a letter, you think about what you write, and also there's a definitiveness about sending it. There's that act of waiting and the act of writing, so it just makes you, I think, a bit more empathetic. It just makes you more human. And I think anger gets a bit of a moment, and anxiety gets a bit of a moment. There's a bit of a pause. I love the fact that Paru is nodding to what I'm saying. So it was a very conscious decision to do letters as the medium of communication, and the girls were, I love them. They did not look themselves up. The only person they talked to
Wow.
is me. So they were really true to the spirit of the project.
Mm.
So we were but very concerned also about their revealing their identities. This whole idea of this being real life, and they might be going through a certain process of writing. But what about the readers who will read it? And will they react? And will they be angry? And will they misunderstand? But I think the girls have been very careful, because they knew that even though these are personal letters, they're not personal. There's an agreement that they will go public. So
Mm.
again, I think that added a layer of patience. So that has made the conversation very rich. And they are extremely happy that it's going to be out. And both of them read the final manuscript before it went to print. And they both said that we wish every youngster reads it, because the world would be a happier place. Their worlds would be a happier place, because they and I feel so glad. I mean, for me, that was such a huge vote of confidence, because I'm telling their story. So the book has got their letters, which, like you said, keeps the story going. You want to read the next one, but it's got all these pauses in which I'm telling the story of the region, the politics, and so on. But it still continues to, it has threads of their life, what they're going through, like when the abrogation happened and there was complete silence for months. Soumya, who's a writer in Delhi, could not contact Dua in Srinagar.
Right.
And the last they had talked to each other was Eid in the summer. And 5th August, there's this complete silence, and they're not able to get in touch with each other. And then I remember very clearly, Soumya told me that, one day Dua sent me, called me sent me a video on Instagram in which she's saying, "Can you hear gunshots? And there's pitch darkness. There's firing outside." And that's it. And it was an Insta story. This is their medium of communication. And it vanished also, like after a while. And Soumya said, and there was just no way to get to her. And it made me so anxious. So, they've really been living through this. And it's
Yes.
given them so much of love and empathy for each other. And they're so confident of taking their story into the world. That's the beauty of, and that gives me the confidence of keeping them real and their lives real. I think it makes the whole book very honest for anyone who's reading it. And I have tried to keep my own perceptions and interpretations of their life to the minimum, as less
Mm.
as possible. Use it more journalistically to bring heft and to bring, more about their regions, their lives, the external factors that they may not talk about. But their story, I'll let them tell it themselves so that it remains honest and true.
Lovely, lovely response. I can see so many comments. Vijay Lakshmi Nagraj saying, Divya, that's so interesting, and I'm really looking forward to reading your book. Divya Purandar says, I want to read the book for both my teenage son and for myself to understand the perspective from a Kashmiri point of view. Archana Atri saying, this is interesting because my nerds do ask, why should we learn informal letter writing, etc.? We don't really write letters anymore, do we? And Sunila saying, saying, Paru, like smoke will stay with me forever. It's poignant, it's heartbreaking, but there's hope at the end. It's uplifting. That and I'm Not Butter Chicken, both reads for young adults, and a great way of saying, please be kind, we all want peace. So many of them saying that they want their for themselves to read it and for the children in their lives to read it. Both of you have given us such a good sense of your books. Would you like to do a short reading, Paro, from one of books of your choice, and then Divya from Postbox Kashmir? Would you just like to do a quick reading for our audience?
Sure. I would love to. I hope audio will.
So, yeah.
I just wanted to say that um, it was in a school that I was in the staff room, and I overheard some kids during break time. One girl saying very loud and proud, "I hate Muslims,"
Oh.
and sort of those words came like an arrow to my heart, and I looked out of the window, and they were about 12-year-old, a group of 12-year-olds, all nodding in agreement with this statement. And there was no embarrassment about saying this.
Mm.
And then I looked over, and there was one boy standing ashen faced, rooted to the spot. And he was Muslim. And so I start like smoke with with that line. Um, I hate Muslims, and it was pretty brave of the publisher Penguin as well as of the Sahitya Academy who gave it the award for um, for publishing that. Anyway,
Yes,
those
indeed.
are not Paro's words, but the words of an overheard conversation with children. And it really struck me, where are children getting this from? How does a 12-year-old know that she should hate Muslims? Where did
Right.
it come from? Along with nourishing our children with food, we are poisoning them with hate over dinner table conversations. And I think as adults, we have to be very, very careful about what we're saying. So I'm going to read to you from Like Smoke about my son, Shabir Karam. And of course, I've cloaked it or softened it, heightened it with fiction as well. But this, in part, is what really happened to him. "My name is Shabir Karam," said the boy in a voice that was so soft it was barely audible. But no one asked him to speak any louder, for most of the other children gathered there also spoke in voices that were whisper soft. Not shy soft, but scared soft. The hesitation more audible than the words themselves. No one could see his eyes either, because he hid them under a baseball cap slung low over his forehead, concealing who knew what grief hid in those deep brown eyes. The shoulders drooped over as though carrying a burdensome weight. And indeed, there was a weight, the weight of a knowledge far greater than a 14-year-old should have, more experience than a young life should have lived. He barely heard the names of the others except when the sharp voice of a girl rang out with more aggressive confidence than any other voice in the room. हम इनके नाम नहीं याद कर सकते, बहुत अजीब हैं. They're too different from us. Shabir looked up and was frightened by the rage in the grey eyes of the girl who spoke so vehemently. Shabir couldn't help the shudder of sudden resentment that shot through him. He looked at her, glancing around, relieved that everyone was looking at the girl and not at him. He hated people looking at him. He hated being noticed at all. What was she so resentful about? Shabir wondered. After all, she was a Hindu, And the Hindus had just taken the coward's way out. They had run away and left the Muslims to deal with things that were so bad.
Gosh.
Now they were no longer under curfew and they were living so comfortably, tat bat se, in their own room, in their own homes. Yet the girl had the nerve to sit there so straight back and fire-eyed and say that she and her friends, her Hindu friends, refused to try and remember Muslim names.
Mm.
This was the first time he'd met a Hindu. He knew that all the children gathered here had lost their fathers to militancy, Muslims and Hindus both. But the stories he had heard were different. And I'm not going to read the whole story because it's way too long.
Mm.
But he talks about how he lost his father. And then he forces himself to concentrate on what the women who are conducting the workshop are saying. And he's strangely surprised at what they're saying. Strange because he knew it all along, yet strange because he'd never really thought of it before. They're talking about the bond that binds them all here, the losses, the thread, the deaths that they have witnessed in their families, all the children, Hindus and Muslims alike. Shabir hadn't thought of it before. He wasn't the only one who had lost his father. There were many, all. They'd all lost a lot. He looks again at the girl with new eyes. He's never met a Hindu before, but she seems nice. Even though she seems full of fire, she has a nice smile. And he admires her fire. He doesn't have any yet. He gives her a small wave and smile. She turns away, but not before he's caught a little glimpse of a smile. He's never met a Hindu before, but maybe she's never met a Muslim before either. And maybe, just maybe, they can be friends after all.
Lovely. It's just lovely reading, Paro. Divya, would you like to read a bit from your book as well?
Yes, and it's such a lovely part that Paro has read, and it naturally brings me to say, underscore the fact that the girl in Delhi, Soumya, as the name suggests, is Hindu, and the girl in Kashmir, Dua, again as the name suggests, is Muslim. And yeah, that was also a conscious choice, and I think it has served us well. So, the format of the book is that there are bundles of the girl's letters, and then there are chapters that I have written, which are clearly in my voice. I wanted to read what I think was the eighth letter in the conversation. I'm prefixing that because they had exchanged a few letters by then. This is Soumya writing to Dua from Delhi about something which I initially didn't think they would have the courage or the like just the friendship to talk about azadi. I mean that
Mm.
um, it's got so much baggage to it. So I'll read a portion of Soumya's letter first and a little bit of what I write about azadi. It was one of the most interesting journeys I myself took when I tried to learn more about the slogan. So Soumya writes to Dua: when I had asked you in my previous letter about whether you'd like to study in any city of India, I was not surprised by your answer. That is because I'm so familiar with the treatment meted to Kashmiris. I wish our society was able to save children from this kind of behavior. This kind of inhuman behavior spreading in our society is not restricted to Kashmiris, but towards people of any different region. Ragging is also an expression of that. When I read about a man being used as a human shield in the newspaper, it made me very sad. Such incidents only encourage more inhuman activities. Sometimes I wonder, can't we end this inhumanity from human society? And that there are no restrictions to go or come from any part of the world? Sometimes I get to know from newspapers that Kashmiris want azadi. I want to know, whom do they want freedom from? So after this letter, of course, Dua responds, and I'm not going to read that. For that, you read the book. But I will read a part of the chapter I wrote on Azadi to give a sense of what my writing is also bringing into the book. Dua and Soumya were down to writing their final letters. They had walked a long, a fine line from discussing hobbies to stone pelting and more. How liberating that a friendship of just over a month now had the courage, trust, and equanimity to consider the call for freedom. Azadi. This Urdu word that is simple to pronounce with no complex sounds but has many compounded meanings. They had both heard it on the streets of Srinagar and Delhi. At various protest marches in recent years, young men and women had made it their own. It was written on posters, sung in songs, cried out loud in passionate slogans, but it always harked back to the valley. Its pulsating echo there, forever causing anxiety, an echo that would literally find its way to the university campuses in the country's capital, Delhi. The deeply felt cry for Azadi had always been seized by minorities of different hues at different times. Dalit, Kashmiri, Adivasi, the poor, the working class, the peasants, the intelligentsia, the LGBT community, and women. In December 2012, a year etched in our collective conscience for the inhumane sexual violence inflicted on a young woman on a moving bus in Delhi, it made its way to the capital streets. Young women and men were drawn out of their homes in anger, disgust, and hope. They marched to the capital's heart, India Gate, and asked for azadi. बेखौफ आज़ादी, बाप से आज़ादी, खाप से आज़ादी, शादी करने की आज़ादी, ना करने की आज़ादी. Women did not want security by compromising on their freedoms. They demanded security and freedom, from equal rights to freedom from fear. Feminists had always wanted freedom. The vocabulary of their songs and slogans had started using the term azadi a few decades earlier. Journalist Nirupama Dutt has written about dancing and chanting to the catchy beat of the Azadi number at the Women's Studies Conference in West Bengal's Jadavpur University in 1991. Women activists recount the range of issues the slogan covered at that time. So many battles and so many elusive freedoms, from patriarchy, violence, and silence. Many to be fought with one's own mind and socially taught norms and responsibilities. Feminist Kamla Bhasin said there was no copyright to the rhythmic chant of Azadi, but that everyone had the right to copy it. She pointed to her sisters across the border in Pakistan for inspiring her from their use of the slogan in the 1980s, where it was chanted in the hidden corners of bazaars and melas for fear of reprisals. This is the General Zia ul Haq regime. And I'm not reading further, but then I go on to talk about how from there, from a feminist slogan, it started being used by separatists and by militants, and then how it finds its way to Kashmir. So it's a really interesting journey of the slogan Azadi, and then how it makes its way into these letters, and then how Dua responds to it. So yeah, that's a flavor of this book and where all it's trying to go.
Lovely. It's just so lovely that reading Divya and Paru. But sorry, finish what you were saying. Yeah. No, sorry, you were saying something, Divya, when we just
No, I
interrupted
was
you.
just saying that. So that's what I'm trying to do. In fact, what I also do in the book, I mean, we talk about separatists, we talk about politics, we talk about the role of the central governments over the years. I also talk about the rise of BJP, which is I think very less talked about. I read a book about it as well. I mean, there's Kashmir is always looked at from the lens of either the separatists or from the central government and their control on it. But there's very little that is said about the Hindus in Kashmir. In fact, the first question that Soumya asked Dua, which at that time surprised me, because I was like, oh, really? Is this where the conversation is going to start? So her first question in her first letter was, do only Muslims live in Kashmir?
Mm.
And
Yeah.
that was so illuminating for me, and probably that's a myth that a lot of people believe in, or that. So I spent a lot of time writing about the geography of Kashmir and how the population is concentrated, and how Kashmir is only a small geographical part, and how the valley is just considered to represent all of the Jammu and Kashmir, the erstwhile state. And how the concentration of Hindus and Muslims also changes, within Jammu, within Kashmir, and then the Leh Ladakh region. And I think that it's really interesting. And there's a thread throughout the book in which Dua insists that there's a lot of bonhomie between the two communities.
Mm.
And she talks about Hindus, but very briefly, and it's interesting because it's almost reflective of the Kashmiri Pandit story, or the story of Hindus in Jammu and Kashmir. And it's right at the last letter, when they're exchanging the last letters, when there's this film that was just released on Kashmiri Pandits. And that is Soumya's reference to Kashmiri Pandits, and she talks about it. And that's when Dua sort of elaborates on that. But throughout, without fail, her focus is on the bonhomie, and she gives examples of her own life, of her mother's life, of how the two communities have coexisted. And I think that is the beauty of the book, because that is what she chooses to cling to. And there's one point in the book where I say, it's not easy to live in the present knowing your history, and it's not easy to make that choice of, will you carry that baggage of history? But if you deny it, that's
Yeah.
wrong too. So you have to
Yes.
own your history. And you also see others, adults owning it way more, because they've witnessed a different part of history. You've grown up in the 2000s, you haven't seen the 1990s, but you feel the weight of it. It's percolated in oral history through your families. So it's really interesting how these young people are choosing to live their lives, which history and how they want to carry it, and how much they want to move forward, and what pulls them back. I think it's a very interesting journey, because it's through these two girls, because it gives you a lens into that constant tussle.
Absolutely.
I
That's what it is. So, yeah,
absolutely
Paru.
agree with
Go
you,
ahead, Paru. Yeah.
Vidya. I just wanted to jump in, Vidya, for a second,
Sure,
um,
sure.
to say that it's. I think there is a great responsibility on young people to strike that balance between knowing your history and understanding it, but also the weight, and more than that, the hatred of it. Who to hate and who you should not hate. And this was, of course, way back in 2000, or maybe even 1999, when I was researching and working on No Man's at my son's funeral. And Vijay, you'll remember that this girl from Baramulla, just as we were ending the whole, almost week-long session of the newspaper, and this one girl had said, "Whatever else happens, let there be peace." And I've ended No Guns at my son's funeral with those words, because at that time, they didn't care which side they fell on. They just wanted peace. Children
Hmm.
would not be able to see their futures. And I think that those waters have got very muddied now. Um, but there has to be the conversation. And I think the conversation that you have facilitated, Divya, has been remarkably positive. I'm so happy to
Yes.
know about this.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Paro.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much. And it's, for me, it's been a journey of discovery. I had never traveled to Kashmir when I embarked on this project. It's a bit embarrassing to admit that as a journalist, but in a way, I am glad, because for me also, it was a journey of discovery. And I think I came with a bit of a blank slate as well. So and it's been, you know, I've been nervous at so many points of time. They've discussed the army, and Soumya had a very different point of view. She knew a family who had lost somebody who was martyred in Kargil, and she had seen the Republic Day celebrations, and the observation of the Kargil anniversary in a
Hmm.
certain light. And I'm not saying she's changed that at all, but to have even those conversations where the army is seen as an occupying force in Kashmir. But I digged, and Dua did not have that hatred to the army. So I feel she came with an openness. And she, because when I went to Kashmir, after this project started, and then eventually I went to Kashmir and I saw the omnipresent, it's actually unnerving to see a man with a gun at every nook and corner. I mean, somebody has to see it. It's not something you can talk about. You have to experience it. It just lends a bit of nervousness, and it's very unusual. We get nervous with Delhi police. We get police on the street and we feel, oh, okay, we don't want to have anything to do with them. Imagine having somebody with like a big gun, even if it's pointing down. And she said, it's fine. It's just part of the scenery for me now, which I think is such a big thing to say. I mean, how she feels from inside, she may not have bared her soul because she's conscious she's doing this in the public and she's conscious of possible reprisals. And I don't want to interpret beyond what she's telling me. But even if there is something in her heart which has some anger towards that presence or the possibility of violence instead of the possibility of safety that it's meant to signify, even if she has all of that in her, this is what she chooses to say. And I think that's important. I think that's important.
We had brought some Kashmiri children to Delhi, and we were somewhere, and there was a wedding procession going past, and there were some firecrackers, and we all went to the window to see, as we normally do, see the procession and firecrackers. And suddenly we looked around and found that the Kashmiri children weren't with us.
Mm,
The school children from Delhi were all at the windows, but the
yeah.
Kashmiri children were not. And when we looked around and found that they were like under the table, behind the sofa, and all of this, because what had been a celebratory sound for us was the sound of gunfire for them. And that's how
Mm,
ingrained it becomes.
yeah.
True. It is, the books. I mean, there have been so many comments. We ask you to read it off our Facebook chat afterwards. There's just so many people who've, put in their views. The lovely thing is that, books like yours, Paro, and books, your book, Divya, that danger of a single story. We need to take that out of our lives, and that's really what you, do with your books. I know we are way past time, but and we had questions on pandemic books and just a whole lot of other things. But I'm going to ask you one concluding question. Both of you, we're often as people who are introducing books to parents and teachers and librarians, we're always asked this question about why do we need to introduce books with complex themes to children? And when I was talking to Paro yesterday, she said even Dr. APJ Abdul Kalam, who she had the opportunity of meeting, said, "What a wonderful book! But why have you done this for children or young adults?" I want both of you to just very quickly say why you think these books are really required, because most of the audience watching, they're parents, teachers, and librarians.
I think that we really underestimate children. They are very well aware of what's happening. And I think for me, a story really puts it in a way that's easy to grasp and hold on to and understand and break down and all of that. Um, Never ever in all these years that I've been writing, which is since the 1980s, has a child said that something I wrote was inappropriate for children? Never once. In fact, the kind of things that they ask for are sometimes that I know I could never write because it would not get published. But schools have banned my books.
Yeah.
Like one Sahitya Academy, but was also banned. No One's at My Son's Funeral, and we have also been banned by school. I think that we have to be brave and talk dirty with our kids. And by dirty, I don't mean use the F word, but talking about hard topics.
Absolutely. Absolutely, Divya.
I'm so glad, Paro, you said that because that was going to be first half of my answer. So we're done with that. And I totally endorse it because now that I've engaged with these 15-year-olds, oh my God, dare I suppose that they don't get it. um, but the second point I wanted to make, and that was also again a conscious decision for this project, we wanted to catch them early. And 15 was really like the upper limit where we wanted them to be conscious of what they're living through, but we didn't want them to have very hardened opinions. And actually, in the process of the book, they're over 18 now. And I see them evolve into young women with their own opinions, which are, I think, much stronger than when they started talking. But I feel that they're informed. And I think that's why we need these books. That's why we need, of course, we need fiction, which I believe would be easier to empathize with, understand, and read. But we also need this kind of book, which gives you bare facts which are not there in our textbooks. So for all the librarians and teachers watching, you will not find this in I didn't have this luxury in my textbooks. And in fact, I've been looking at history textbooks for another project I'm involved with, and no, they scratch the surface of many things. But this kind of book, and when Kashmir is so intrinsic, the attack in Pulwama was the key thing that turned the 2019 election. So that's how important Kashmir is. The abrogation, I mean, everything that's happening right now. And like I say, this book is not only about Kashmir, it's also giving you a Kashmir lens into India. So it's about the India. I mean, I'm guessing the majority of the audience today would be in India because just geographically and numerically, that would be more. So it's about us as well. It's about my life as somebody living outside Kashmir as well. And I think we don't get that. And I think it's important to inform young people while they're still willing to be informed, while they're still willing to understand and empathize with the other. Um, that's why I think this is important.
Yeah, absolutely well said. That's exactly why, we need to build empathy. We need to, they have hearts and minds with, solutions to many things, many of the problems that we ourselves have created in the world. And that's really why books with complex themes, they don't fly off our shelves that often. But I'm happy to say, and amongst the parents who are watching, teachers and librarians, I hope you'll pick up Paro's books. She has just a whole clutch of them. There's over 30 or 40 books, I think, isn't Paro? I mean, at
Something.
least I think we have 30 of them at Funky Rainbow at the moment. And Divya's new book as well. We would love it if it went from FR into all your houses and libraries. Thank you, ladies. Thank you so much for joining us. This has got to be one of our longest bazaars ever. It's lovely to meet chatterboxes across the screen. We could talk for another 2 hours, but maybe our audiences need to have lunch as well. I want to say that we're taking a break for a month to recharge our batteries, to bring in more themes. So for all our viewers out there, please do send us suggestions on what bazaars you'd like to see. We'll try to find these intersections. Nothing gives us more pleasure than bringing children's books into every single space possible in the world. So please do, write to us. Till then, we hope to enjoy our piece of paradise, which is our office and our little traveling bookshop. But
Thank,
sorry.
thank you very much to Funky Rainbow, to both of you, Sham and Vidya, and all the people connected with Funky Rainbow for doing this for us.
Indeed, I mean, talking about Kashmir to young people, it's a really prized opportunity. Thank you so much, Vidya, and it was great to talk alongside Paro. And I think the two perspectives. I mean, it was interesting for me, and I'm hoping it's interesting for the audience who've I think been posting some really nice comments, which I'm going to read at leisure. So thank you all, and I really hope you pick up the book. It's for young adults. It's also for adults, open to some newer conversations. So yeah, I'm going to shamelessly pitch it because it's been a
No
labor of
harm,
love. And the
no,
first
no
one is
shame in
always,
pitching.
the most special. I'm sure Paro would agree to that.
Everyone is special,
Oh, is
really.
it? Okay. So that encourages me to write more now.
No shame in pitching books. Thank you so much, ladies, for joining us. Thank you to our audience. I know there's a whole bunch of you. I'm just going to quickly say hi to everybody and let you go have your lunch. Archana Atri, Vijay Lakshmi Nagraj, Divya Purandar, Nalini Sorensen, Sumitra Raghavan, Shakir Nayak, Annapurna Das, Srilata Ramesh, Shruti Sri Raghunath, Preeti Menon, Parag, an initiative of Tata Trust, Dipali Taneja, Learning to be Mum, Ride Home, Vinita Stories, Uma Leogal, Sumi Anup, uh, The Nesteri, Pridipti, Ameti, Neetu Goyal, Artbeat, and Payaldhar. Thank you so much for joining us at the Bazaar. We'll be back with a new season of Bazaars in September. Till then, uh, consider picking up books from Funky Rainbow. Write to us at 99004 95665, and make sure that our books go here, there, everywhere. I really mean it from all of us at Team Funky Rainbow who want to say bye to you, because we're going to take a break for a month. I don't know whether these lines were written for Kashmir or not, but I believe that they were written for us at our office. If there is a heaven on earth, it is this, it is this, it is this. On behalf of everyone at Team Funky Rainbow, bye bye, and we'll see you next month. Are we already in next month? Okay, we'll see you in September. All right. Thank you, and have a great weekend. All the books up in our Kashmir Bazaar, so do consider picking them up. Bye bye.